Coming up, a blowout in Brooklyn, but the Nets are on the winning side of things. We talk about Dennis Schroeder. We talk about Cam Johnson and how, of course, the Nets know exactly how to tug at our heartstrings. We dive in on the big win coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the winning Brooklyn Nets, every single day. Over there's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We are 100% free on all those great platforms. And tell you, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. And Doug, listen, I try to take nights off from the pod. I try to get away from this team, but I can't do it. I just can't quit the Brooklyn Nets.
Where's this team been all my life, man? How dare anybody that didn't believe in this team for the rest of the season? How dare you if you said Cam Johnson was overpaid? How dare you if you might have thought Dennis Schroeder could have been washed? Not us. Not us. Don't even and here's the thing. Don't even bother looking back on the podcast feed. Nothing to see there. That's because the Nets come into this game against the Hawks. I mean, for where the Nets are just in the current standings, kind of a must win if they still want to stay within the play-in hunt. And they play like arguably their best game all season, led by Cam Johnson, led by Dennis Schroeder. Basically, everyone went heat check. It was really something to behold. It was almost like they just passed out and woke up in a different dimension. It was just that kind of game. There were so many examples of it. Sometimes this is how the basketball gods work. Just when you're at your lowest, your team can come back and look like they're championship contenders, at least for a single night. And I'm here for it. It's what makes sports fun.
124-97 is your final score. When Day'Ron Sharpe is daggering triples, you know that you have entered a sweet alternate reality that you never want to leave. You said it, man. I mean, listen, we talked about this when it came to just the firing of Jacque Vaughn and moving into the Kevin Ollie era, and it's seemingly looking like nobody cared. The players top to bottom, the whole organization was like, yeah, whatever. Let's just talk to him when the season's over. And I will say, it's like you can only be honest about these moments. This has been the most pendulum swinging, I don't know, 27 days of my entire existence covering the Brooklyn Nets, because every time I think, and you and I both, every time we think that we have pegged this team down about where they currently stand and what we should expect on a night-to-night basis, they do something like this, which includes a guy that we did not just specifically talk about in a very negative way, Cam Johnson throwing the team on his back and saying, don't worry, boys, I'll be your hero tonight.
Well, we're basically right. We're essentially a podcast removed from saying the contract is terrible. I mean, it was a complete overpay. If he were to hit free agency again, I'll just go through the cliff notes here. Where if you were to hit free agency again this year, it would be like something like 75% to 60% of what he's making. And it's hilarious how this works, because it was very clear right away that he had it going. And it wasn't just, it's so funny how this works. It wasn't just him hitting catch and shoot threes either, which, right, like even that's been sort of up and down for him this year. Although the threes have been actually mostly there. It's that the expansion of the game hasn't been totally there. But he's also like taking guys off the dribble. He's throwing pick and roll lob passes. Yeah. He had an end of the quarter, splits a double team, stutter step, two-handed flush in traffic with a contest, and you're like, all right, hold on a second. Where has this been all year? Because a part of the problem for him this year, among a few different things, is that he's looked really pretty slow, honestly. Like he's looked slow. It's probably he's dealt with some injury stuff, some soft tissue stuff. It's been sort of a struggle, minutes restrictions, but he's just kind of looked like he couldn't beat anybody. And this game was like easily the bounciest he's looked. So I know that it's like easy to just focus on the threes, and maybe him hitting the threes is what gave him like the extra juice that he needed to like feel pretty good about where the game was. But he looked just totally, screening and rescreening off of like these Claxton actions. We haven't really seen too much of that, where he's just coming, like he rejects the screen and then they go back and rescreen, and he's like sort of now in a high pick and roll. I mean, there was a lot of different stuff beyond just the 3-pointers that were going down for him. But it's just funny. Like if we had done that You have to wait 24 hours and you'll have a new, just like a new view. But I will say, just to round this out, I did think besides just the shooting, he looked like a different player. And sometimes like positivity cascades, and that can just be the story also.
What you would love to when you're talking about Cam Johnson is you'd love to look inside of this box score. You mentioned 30 minutes, 10 of 15, just to be clear, from the field, 11 of 7 from downtown, had 4 assists to go along with a couple steals and 29 points. And by the way, they mentioned that he was on 29 points and his career high was 38. And you start to get a little bit optimistic. And then, of course, it's a blowout, so he doesn't even need to push that gas. But you would love to think that a game like this from Cam Johnson is the thing where in your mind you go, okay, now he was injured to start the year, right? And then the hamstring was hampering him, right? And it was he just could never quite fully. And now he is finally getting right. This is what you want to do. Like if you're a masochist, which I might be, you're like, oh, I knew it all along, and you have to pull yourself back from that. But it is at least good to see that this exists for him. Because it has been a long time this season since we talked about Cam Johnson and thought, oh, he could give you 20 plus. Like, you were optimistic that he'd give you over 10 points a night, that you would mention his name more than maybe 2 or 3 times in passing over the course of a 48-minute contest. So the fact that he was able to come out and do that, especially with the recent run where Mikal Bridges has struggled a little bit, where they're without Cam Thomas right now, kind of needed him to do this in a game like this. So that's really another positive for him as well.
Do you know the last time he scored 20 points in a game? I don't know if you looked at this.
No, I didn't.
It was a season
29th.
high. What's that?
It's February 29th now. I'm going to say, gosh, I feel like I'm going too soon if I say it was like January 5th-ish.
Not too far away. The 26th of December. So the day after Christmas, he had 24, and that was his season high. And that's really he's only had 20 points. He only had 20 points 4 times this whole season. And 24 points had been his high. So 29 I know like 38 was his career high or whatever, but 29 was easily his season high. Yeah. Right, by 20% or something like that. So we're looking, it is a standout game for him because we've seen so little of it. So I think that the criticisms around his game were totally fair, right? Like we're kind of going tongue in cheek. We're going tongue in cheek now because he had a great game. And again, he had a great game literally 24 hours removed from us just trashing him on the podcast before. So again,
he's a listener. He's clearly a listener.
Taking the L. I'll take the L from that. Whatever. But really, it has been like it had been a really long time since he'd hit this kind of even close to any kind of scoring ceiling. The consistency was all over the place. If you look back at his recent games, like 9 points, 12 points, 10 points, 6 points, 4 points, right? 13. Like these are the games that we've become used to. So he runs hotter than the sun.
Right? And brick and triples like it was his job as well.
Yeah, and just like not getting to the rim and stuff. So to see all these other pieces of his game, the 2-man action, like I said, getting into there, like becoming a lob distributor, like this kind of stuff happening is hopefully a building block. They need it to be. Like they need it to be. Not every game. He's not going to shoot, 75% from the field or whatever, like every single night. But if they or 66% from the field, but if they can at least be a building block for like, hey, you can beat some matchups, then this is definitely what the Nets need down the stretch.
No, 100%. And by the way, coming up here in a second, let's talk about not only Dennis Schroeder, but matchups specifically. Why this game and why the Atlanta Hawks are actually a team that even in the chaotic state the Brooklyn Nets are currently in, they can still go get wins against. We'll dive into that coming up here in just one moment.
All right, before we get into that, I'll tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. If you had gone into this game with the Nets -1 against the Hawks, I mean, you cleared this so easy. You were cashing both the 5. You were cashing the bet and the 150 before the fourth quarter, and you're well on your way. The FanDuel's going to insist that the game play all the way out. That's the one little stipulation they have over there of their good friends at FanDuel. They got everything there. Quick bets, live same game parlays, exclusive props, so much more. Just visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA.
All right, so as we continue to tie a bow on what was a much-needed victory, and by the way, I don't mean that tongue-in-cheek. They literally had to win this game. 4 games back behind Atlanta. You have another game on Saturday night against them, and even if they win that game as well, you're still in a hard spot needing to chase this team down. But guess what? As you had mentioned, I think on the last episode, lose even one of these games. You can't split these games against Atlanta if you want to have any optimism around the remainder of the season. So in that way too, not only for Cam Johnson, but for the team as a whole, hey, this was kind of a back against the wall moment for you. And at least you pushed yourself off of it, right? You didn't just lay down and get rolled over by the Trae Youngless Atlanta Hawks and say, okay, I guess that was it for us. Let's get through these next 20 plus games and move on. In that vein as well, the other player here, Dennis Schroeder, who showed up with 27 minutes, 9 of 15, 5 of 7 from beyond the arc. And then, I mean, this is a line. Like, this is the kind of line. I'll be honest with you. Once upon a time, we thought Spencer Dinwiddie would be providing for the Brooklyn Nets. 8 rebounds, 7 assists, 23 points tonight. When he's on, and we saw this in his first game, this is now the third game as a Net that we've seen this. When he's on, Dennis Schroeder can get to the bucket. He can create space for himself. He can set up teammates. Like, he can do it all for you. And I think that just comes from being a veteran player and having played in a lot of systems with a lot of different guys. He's pretty malleable to the cast that's around him.
Yeah, it's been kind of hit or miss since he got to the Nets for sure. Like, the first game seemed like they had really, really gotten something, right? That was against the Spurs, one of the worst defenses in the league, but he goes 15 and 12 in that game. And you're like, oh man, where's this been? Like, we needed this with Dinwiddie. And then he basically kind of came back down to earth, and you could see it was like the version of it where you could see where the Raptors were like sort of fine moving off of it, right? For another season as they move forward. So it's one of these things too, where the consistency hasn't really all the way been there, but the last 3 games, 18 points, 15 points, and now 23 points. There is, when he is playing well, the Nets, have lacked the time, sort of like an offensive stabilizer. Now, he's not really there's not like a really high ceiling here, but there are times when you just need a guy to run pick and roll, right? Where you need to have, like, if he's going to be paired with Claxton, paired with Sharp, you can just set a high screen for him. He can sort of get into the mid-range. Tonight, 5 for 7 from 3. That's really not going to be something that you can bank on, clearly. Never has been like a really great three-point shooter. But, like, just, again, stabilization. The Nets really haven't had tons of this. Like, they don't have any real true point guards on the roster. He's probably the only one, right? Dinwiddie was the only sort of one before. They have other guys who can sort of handle the ball but have limitations, right? Like Ben Simmons. They can handle the ball, but like aren't necessarily offensive organizers, right? Like Cam Thomas. Yeah. And so Schroeder is that, if like you kind of just know what he is at this point. But but the Nets have, like, for what he is, we know that the Nets kind of also need this guy. So decent matchup, like, in terms of the Hawks defense isn't very good. Point of attack defense is not amazing, but overall, you could see that, like, once the ball started rolling downhill for this team early, and everyone was feeling just sort of like extremely confident that they could kind of get whatever they wanted against the Hawks, you could kind of see it in everyone's faces and in everyone's games, his included, that he was like, oh, we're just going to have at it here, right? Pick and roll, no problem. Mid-range, no problem. Get to the rim, no problem. Like, everything was just kind of easy. And that's a good thing for him, who's going to sort of dictate the pace at which they play.
Yeah, and that's what it is. A veteran player that understands, right? Okay, this is it. This is how we're getting buckets tonight. Let's go ahead and lean into it. And then as a team in totality here, when you just take the step back, this is also the model that, remember, once upon a time back at the beginning of the year, okay, what's this team going to be? Fire away. 46 attempts from beyond the arc, knock down 22 of them, almost 48% from deep. Like, that's how this team is going to win basketball games. Schroeder contributing there as well, and then spreading it out throughout this roster, some guys hitting some timely buckets to go along with it. So, I mean, listen, I guess to take the brief pause before we talk about maybe I'll jump ahead here just for a second.
Well, okay, go ahead. Yeah, I want to say one more thing about Schroeder, but before you just move off of him, I just want to. But if you're going to move off him, no problem. But if you're not, I want to say one more thing.
Yeah, I am going to move off of him. Say one more thing.
Okay, so real quick, because the other thing they needed to do this game, which he helped sort of organize, was like that they needed to be able to, because they turned the ball over. Last game, they turned the ball over more than they had assists, right? Yeah. Which is a really disturbing stat whenever you see that happen. Tonight, 30 assists to just 9 turnovers. Right. And you could see when they realized early, and this is the other thing that you hope sort of translates going forward, is that when they were able to beat the first guy, which they were really able to, I mean, sort of a disturbing defensive performance by the Hawks. Like, they really should not have gotten beat this many times off the dribble by this group of guys, right? Because, which just ends up leading to so many open shots. But kind of everyone felt like they could probably beat their first defender. So you get, and then that leads to lots of assists. So right. He kind of led the charge there, but this is also a really sort of high watermark in terms of assist to turnover rate that he kind of started, but everyone was sort of in on, which was, hey, make the extra pass and there's going to be a really good shot at the end of it. Like, that is something we haven't seen much of at all with this team. So anyway, I know you're going to move on to something else, but I just wanted to kind of pay homage to the idea that they early on were just getting these incredible looks, mostly because everyone was willing to make the one extra pass once they got their own space.
No, listen, and I'll save the front court conversation for segment number 3 here. And I'll also add in inside of the starting rotation, because you mentioned the assists. We said 7 for Schroeder, obviously, 4 for Cam Johnson to go with his big scoring night, 5 for Mikal Bridges, who in 34 minutes, 6 of 14, only 3 of 9 from beyond the arc, just 15 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists to go along with a 0 turnover performance, right? So the turnover to the assist to turnover ratio is right for basically every single player throughout this roster. And I'll also say, for a guy in Mikal who, I mean, listen, it's not easy, but it's justified to drag almost everybody on this roster in the recent games. To be in a game with no Cam Thomas, and again, to go into the box score and say, Mikal Bridges gave you 15 points in 34 minutes, 3 of 9 from deep, you'd say, I can't imagine what the final score of this was. So I'm really just a testament to Schroeder and a testament to Cam Johnson. Again, it wasn't a terrible night for Mikal Bridges, but it's another one of those examples of Mikal Bridges needs to fall into a pecking order, and the pecking order should never really start with him at the top. And I think on nights like these, you see how his value can exist when he does not have to be the number one scorer, and when he can kind of create his game off of that and then lock it on both ends of the floors for different reasons.
Yeah, for them to be able to, that's the other kind of key point here too, is that for them to win the game where he doesn't have really all that great of a game, but I think he also sort of recognized early that he didn't need to, like, sort of everyone else.
That's what I mean, right?
Yeah, well, everyone, like you said, like once the recognition is that our baskets are going to be kind of easy no matter who's taking them, then all of a sudden I think there is like a pressure alleviation point that he hits where it's just like, hey, I just don't need to force these tough shots, right? I don't need to force a contested shot in the lane, or a contested shot at the basket, or just a mid-range look with a big hand in my face, which he takes a lot of, right? And so when you don't have to take those tougher shots, it's not really a down game for him. It's just a deferred game from him. And I think that is a pretty important distinction to make with where we are with Bridges' game. Because I think the universal agreement here is that he's not a 1 or probably even a 1A, which is fine, right? Now, it's not great for where the Nets are right now, but it's probably just the state of reality. So when he can just be the third scorer on a team on a given night because everyone else has it, you're not going to be able to count on this most times, but you can see that it like ends up just being a fine thing. Like, it's not a bad game. It's just hey, I don't need to do everything. And that's probably some relief to him more than anything else.
Yeah, and I think it's like, if you think about the superstars of the NBA, which Mikal Bridges is not, but oftentimes, a Kevin Durant in a postgame when he puts up 45 and the Nets lose, right? Or now the Suns, we all understand he doesn't play here anymore. We're all still sad about that. But when stars talk about that, it's like, well, I can't do it all myself, right? So if you think about that for the model of player that Mikal Bridges is and where the expectations should be, when you mention like, hey, if I see other people scoring, it means that I know I don't need to do the thing that, frankly, I'm not entirely bullish that I can do, which is go score 30 plus points a game or something if we needed me to be the focal point of the offense. And then without Cam Thomas there tonight as well, you go, now I already probably have that pressure building. So other guys stepping up in a big way really matters, which is why coming up here in a second, we'll get into the bench unit for the Brooklyn Nets. We'll talk not only Lonnie Walker from the outside, but even Dennis Smith Jr. kicking one in, but more importantly, Day'Ron Sharpe, baby, set the world on fire. We talk bench mob coming up in just one moment.
All right, before we get into that, tell you about our friends over at Prize Picks. It's demon time on Prize Picks. You can win up to 100 times your money. I read that correctly. 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 for all you math majors out there. Demons and Goblins, newest and most exciting way to play a Prize Picks. Squares marked with red demons or green goblins. They're going to give you different payouts, and you can win up to 100x your money with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks even offers injury insurance, so your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. And Prize Picks just figured this out. With Prize Picks, you're just going more or less on the Prize Picks projections. It's just that simple. You just pile together a bunch of different plays. Like an NBA, you're going more or less on the points, the rebounds, assists, the blocks, the steals. and away you go. Take a look for those demons and goblins as well. You just pick the players you like, pick the stats you like, go against the Prize Picks projections, and you are on your way. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Code LockedOnNBA. First deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
All right, so as we continue to wrap up the Brooklyn Nets' sweet victory against the Atlanta Hawks at home, a foe that they will see again on Saturday night, looking to close the gap for that final play in seed. We remind you, get over to WeGotNets.com. Catch yourself 5 stories in 5 days with a free ebook. Sign up with your email. Reach out to us with your questions, your comments, your bold predictions for how the Brooklyn Nets go to the NBA Finals this year, and so much more at WeGotNets.com. Check it out today. Okay, the other thing, so I mentioned, again, in games like these, a couple of big performances from the starters, but you're going to need more than that. You get 33 combined points between Day'Ron Sharpe, Dennis Smith Jr., and Lonnie Walker. Now, Lonnie Walker, 16 minutes, 4 of 9, 3 of 6 from beyond the arc. That's essentially what Lonnie Walker has been doing for you the whole time, being an assassin from the outside. I tongue-in-cheek mentioned the perimeter shooting for Dennis Smith Jr., but 4 of 7 from the field is not a joke in 21 minutes. Like, that is found money when he's a plus 12 in that category as well with his 10 points. And then Day'Ron Sharpe. I rarely call back to tweets from times ago, but well over a month ago, I said I would bet not only all of Doug's money, but the lives of his children, that Day'Ron Sharpe would start taking some above the break threes as we worked our way down the back end of this season. He's the guy in this front court that can, in theory, do this in his game. He's an above 40% three-point shooter, by the way, for his career. To 42%. See him knock him down, like in real game time, not in garbage time, it was just a thrill, man. We can talk more about this, but it was a pleasure. It was just a pleasure to see Day'Ron draining him.
Yeah, back-to-back threes. You had the DSJ step-in three in transition off a steal, which you can basically call game over when that happens, right? When he's just hitting heat check kind of threes. I mean, Day'Ron's were heat check too. They were open looks. But we begged for this for him, right? To just shoot more, be a little bit of a stretch 5. Sometimes it's a little hard for them because they, again, without a good point guard, it's sometimes hard to run pick and pop stuff with any regularity because you just don't need to necessarily guard it. And they just really haven't had great personnel for this all time, but there hasn't really been a total willingness for him to do it either. They just don't find themselves in a lot of these different situations, but you absolutely love to see it. He's been good. He hasn't taken many of them, but he's made a lot for his career, right? He's made enough that you can you don't even have to squint and see it. So I did think these were kind of hilarious, these 3-pointers, that the 2 that he hit, the DSJ one, but they were sort of the theme of the night, which is that sometimes when things are just going well, the loose feeling you have allows some of this more mechanical stuff to work, right? You're just not tight. You're winning. It's easy. The pressure's kind of off. Everyone else has picked it up. So you have a ton, you're up 30 or 20 your points. And those are easier times to hit some of this stuff because you're just not tight. The pressure's not on. So I think part of it's that, but in general, for Day'Ron specifically, I think for DSJ, we kind of know what it is, but for Day'Ron specifically, if he could just expand this to just do this just a little bit more, I mean, there is an unlocking potential to his game, which is kind of there, right? I hesitate to go too crazy with this, but he's done it. He's been able to hit these sort of like you said, above the break threes, and that's just not the easiest shot in the world. And I don't think it's luck that 40% of his have gone in.
No, listen, 22 of 7, in his rookie season, 6 of 11 last year, and now 4 for 11 on this season. So to your point, I think my thing with Day'Ron and this little moment you see here is, it's like when fans talk about Nicholas Claxton. Well, if he can just stop it, right? Nicholas Claxton, now has he taken one in a game? Yes, he has, but it's not something that even looks like it's in the mind of anyone, Nicholas Claxton included. It's like when people talk about Ben Simmons, we say, oh, well, if he can just get his shot together, if he can start taking 3-point looks, why would you ever think after this many years in the NBA of a player that's never shown an interest in that thing that he's capable of going to do it? And when you go back and think about Day'Ron coming out of college, this was the model. They said it would take a while, but if you gave him time, the shot could come around for him. The free throw percentage suggests that it could come around. That's been up and down for him over his career so far, but the footsteps are there. right? The footsteps are there to say that he could be a little bit of this thing. And I think it's just a really good point that you bring up about with the way this team is constructed, it's going to be hard typically to find pockets where Day'Ron could take looks like this, right? He's not going to create space for himself to knock down, knock down the big three.
Like,
so it has to be a product of the spacing, of the defensive attention, of getting to the teeth and having him be a trailer in some of those moments.
Right. Like, to be a big that really stretches the court, you need a point guard who can get to the rim. Like, right. Like because you have to be able to drag either like the primary defender or the help defender into the space so that you can pop and not roll. Right. And so, like, if you think about the guys who do this, Chet, Şengün, Jokic, like what's like, they can all, I'm not comparing Day'Ron to any of these guys, but what's the common denominator between those guys is they have like really good point guards to run pick and roll with, right?
Like Brook Lopez in Milwaukee was everything there for him, but
right. Exactly. And so like there's like this other component that you kind of need to be able to get quality looks from that space.
Right.
Just because you need to have the defenders worried that the first guy on the pick and roll action is going to, like they're not going to tag the roller. You're going to be like sort of in trouble. So the Nets really don't have these kind of guys really. And so that is always going to make it a little bit harder also. And so this is the other reason I don't expect to see it a lot. And that's why sometimes these come in late games when it's all just a little more loosey-goosey than anything else. But again, he can't hit it. So it's one of these things like, hey, if you could just get like another guy in here that could just help facilitate some of this, I think we would see at least a few more attempts per year by him.
100%. Now let's get weird here, Doug. I don't know why for some reason I'm about to call you Mike, and I'm going to expose that right here on the podcast. Okay. I don't know anybody named that, and I've known you for quite some time.
We've only done like 1,000 podcasts together, so it's no big deal. And like see each other all the time, and basically a part of the same family. But I can see why you get the name wrong. It's like
I can see where I just couldn't put the name to the face.
That makes sense.
Oh my God! Don't watch
Names
on YouTube.
Are tough.
I am as red as a strawberry now. When we talk about the Nets winning this game, they've won, 2 out of their last 3. And of course, it's hard to look at that because they get absolutely destroyed by the Orlando Magic. But because you play the same Atlanta team again here at home on Saturday night, then you play the Grizzlies team that you blew out just 2-3 games ago, 76ers mixed in, Detroit and Charlotte. Like, I hate to do it, man, but I'll commit to it now before we get to the weekend that you have to at least buy into these next 5 games here for Brooklyn. They meet Saturday is the most important one. And if they can win that, then you can look at the schedule ahead and say that 3 out of the next 4 games are winnable for them. Whatever you think this season is or is not. If the goal is to make it look like you can be competitive and try to get that last play-in game, they had to win this one. Now the next step is winning the next game, but they're right in that sweet spot that we talked about after they fired Jacques Vaughn in those first 2 Boston games, that this was a very soft stretch of matchups for them that in theory, on paper, were winnable games.
Yeah, I mean, they have to do it. Like, they have to go all out here. They have given themselves no chance. They have to be able to try to save the lottery embarrassment as much as they can, like with the Rockets pick.
Yeah, let's clearly put that in there too. It's also about that saving.
Yeah, I think it's all about that actually. Yeah. Like it's all about that. Like, they got to save face a little bit on this. If they can just claw their way into like having at least one meaningful basketball game near the end. I think they'll probably see it as something like mission accomplished. Whether that's true or not, I don't really know, but that's clearly where they need to be.
Hang the banner if they avoid giving a high lottery pick to Houston.
Well, to be fair to the Nets, we kind of always knew they were going to be in this spot. Like the recent bad run aside, I mean, this was always kind of the thing, right? It was just going to be like, can you make the playoffs to avoid that pick looking too bad on paper that Houston's going to get, right? Like 100%. that was going to be the problem. But they're set up to a place where it's at least feasible. Their recent game log is absolutely hilarious and we'll close out on this. We'll stick around a few minutes here in YouTube live. But if you looked at, I just had it in front of me. Did I click off it? Shoot. Okay. Yeah. I'll get it back. I'm going to vamp here for 2 seconds while I get it back up. So they win, they win tonight by 27. This is coming off a game that they lost by 27. Then the game before that, they won by 26. And then the game before that, they lost by 15. And then the game before that, they lost by 28, right? So like it's been absolute feast or famine since Kevin Ollie took over. It's either they get completely blown out or they completely blow out the other team. There has been no in between since he took over.
Well, guess what? When you hunt, you know what I mean? Sometimes you hunt, you kill. Sometimes you hunt, and you come home damn hungry. And that's the way the Brooklyn Nets are.
Or you get hunted. You don't know. You walk into the woods and you don't know if you're the hunter or the hunted. Okay, we'll get out of here. We're going to stick around on YouTube for a few extra minutes for those of you that showed up after a big Nets win. In the meantime, make sure you go grab that free ebook at wegotnets.com.
Learn from yesterday, live for today, hope for tomorrow. Allie Einstein.
One of the all-time great poets. We'll be back again tomorrow in a moment on YouTube talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball. Yeah. Oh, baby. When the podcast ends, the post-podcast begins with you, the fans, talking about this game and only this game, because I don't want to talk about all the bad games that they've had. If you're in the comments, shout out at Locked On Nets. I start a couple here. We'll stick around for a few minutes because we're in what is a looser. And quite frankly, I think the original podcast was a little bit loose on our end as well.
Just a little look behind the curtain here.
Behind the curtain.
Adam was not going to do the podcast today. Well, he's an absolute front runner. Like I was 1 second away from clicking record on the podcast, and I was just going to do it solo. I had all my notes. I was ready to go. Everything queued up. Mm-hmm. And Adam comes in. You should read this text message because who would have any idea what was happening here? He just writes, okay. By the way, I'm thinking he's off tonight. He writes, okay, let's hit it. Then nothing. Then nothing happened. Nothing happens. I say, are you serious? I'm about to hit record. I wasn't going to do it live, but I'm going to post it right away. Then there's 5 minutes of just total silence by Adam. So you have no idea what he's going to do. I'm sitting here waiting to record. Then I write ? Yay or nay. I'm literally hitting the record button in 60 seconds, but we'll wait if you're coming. Mm-hmm. I wait another 180 seconds because there's still no response. Yeah. Then he writes, here I come to wreck the day. And then and here we are.
And here we are. What a journey. Listen, guys, I don't want to miss out on any of the good vibes that this team can give us because gosh darn it, they're few and far between. So that is what happened. But I thought that we really pulled it off brilliantly. Frankly, that
was perfect.
I think that I carried a bit of the episode.
But buddy, I'm giving you flack, but I wouldn't have it any other way. It's way more fun to talk to you than it is to do solo. But hey, that's how the podcast bread is buttered.
You better believe it. Let's talk a little bit about you, the people here. I'm going to shoot this one on the fly here. Usually, Hebla keeps it clean. I got to scan these things for any, profanities, especially when you're celebrating a win. Are we believers of the power of friendship now? I'm thinking I'm locked in Nets. Yeah, listen, there's something going on here. It feels pretty special to me. Everyone should know that the reason I wasn't going to attend this is because I actively made the decision to watch 4 hours leading up to the Nets game of Combine for the NFL because I'm a psychopath. Just dudes lining up, running up and down a field in skin-tight shorts with numbers on their backs. So, but friendship matters. Friendship brings the world together, I'd say. Let's also take a look over here now. This is double down for Hebla. Play-in tournament. Here we go. You play-in banner.
There we go.
I like that.
And then we got Gerard. I'm praying before every game now. Good. Always good. Get a little prayer in.
Got to give everything you got. And how about so nice to see all the guys have a great game all around. Confidence-wise, they needed that performance badly. Yeah, listen, I wish Mikal Bridges had been more involved in that confidence, but no. Jokingly, somebody had to step up. I made the joke. I also made the joke. Wow, looks like Cam Thomas was the guy holding this team back. Clearly got him out of the way. Ben Simmons, dead weight. Let's move on and have a good time. What I will say is nice in these games. Like you talk about some of the actions that they specifically ran that allowed Cam Johnson to do everything within his repertoire that we thought he could, but hasn't always shown. I said this in the Memphis game too. They're a terrible team and you blew them out, but you try to take away the fact that it looks like Kevin Ollie is trying to run sets offensively. Like he's trying to instill something into this team that Jacques Vaughn was never doing, right? We were never getting this sense that they were trying to run something that wasn't working. It was, as we said, your turn, my turn, whose turn, we don't know. And that was a part of the frustration that players alluded to.
Yeah, they definitely have run like some more clear, repeatable sets. Like they had the 2-man action with Cam Johnson and Claxton and also Daron Sharp. They've been running horns a decent amount. Like they've been running it's like usually where Cam Johnson's like the second big. So they'll like bring Claxton up to the foul line and they'll bring Cam and then there's kind of like either set screens or set a screen and then break off. And that's trying to get Cam Johnson open looks, right? Like they're trying to run him through the horn set, which is just like basically two bigs at the top of the key, and then you kind of initiate an action through a point guard. Again, these are like you can't really run horns with Ben Simmons because he doesn't really he doesn't like he's not the right type of point guard for that. But like with Dennis Schroeder, you can. So they definitely try to do that. There's a couple like sort of like Iverson cuts by Mikal Bridges tonight where he would come across the lane through through like a mini pin down screen or just kind of like an in the way action to kind of try to get him initially freed up. So there's been for sure some stuff that's been happening. They didn't run like full sets every single time, I think, but there's been some things that I've seen repeated a few times now that are encouraging around at least trying to free some of these guys up. It has not worked a lot. Again, they've been doing this for a few games now, and they've gotten crushed in a few of these games. But if you watch out for it, there does seem to be a little bit more intention on the offense, even if the execution isn't always there.
And it seems to work against bad teams, like, bad defensive teams, bad teams. Seems to be a little bit easier to get to your spots, and that's what you expect with that too as well. Let's hit a couple of these here as well. This isn't a bad one. Got to keep this in our back pocket, Doug. Can you trash Cam Johnson again, please? I like seeing him play well. So we do have a balancing act here. We have praised him. We have to sneak in a bonus episode just to make sure we get him back down into his form. I also enjoy this one. How seriously would you consider resting Mikal a couple of games so as to not blow out those tires?
Yeah, we said this a ton that he plays too many minutes, and it's ridiculous, this consecutive game streak. Sorry.
He played 35 minutes tonight.
I know that it's not ridiculous, and if I had it going, I would also not want to sit. So I get it, and you never know. You could blow out your knee tomorrow, so you might as well play all the games you can. So I'm really not saying that he should sit necessarily, but we've been through this so many times. He's played it's either the second or third most minutes. I think it's the second most minutes over the last 5 years. Only Tatum has played more. And which is even more disturbing because Tatum went to the finals and had long playoff runs, right, for basically every single year. And Bridges definitely had some of that with the Suns. And the one thing in his credit here is that not all minutes are the same. So
Mikal Bridges is now number one. He has played 12,955 minutes, moving past DeMar DeRozan and Jason Tatum, who's there in the third position.
Yeah, but that doesn't count playoffs though, because DeRozan wouldn't be there. So I don't think you got to.
You got to throw those.
You got to look at playoff. You have to sort for playoffs too. And so it was Tatum and Bridges, and there's no way Bridges would have caught Tatum because Tatum was really pretty far ahead of him last time I looked. But anyway, not all minutes are the same. So 38 minutes of Kevin Durant doing every single, or 42 minutes of Kevin Durant doing every single thing against the Bucks in that one series is different than Bridges' time in Phoenix, where he never took a shot. He would, wouldn't shoot a lot, right? When he was sort of the fourth option. So not all minutes are created equally. That being said, long story short, yes, he's played too many minutes. If they have hope to keep this going for a few more years, they have to find ways to limit it.
Of course. Gerard, have you been with us? Have you been with us since the Bali days? Adam and Doug go way back to Thailand.
Oh man, that's pre Locked On Nets. That's We Got Nets.
That's head over to We Got Nets and sign up for the free ebook time. Yeah, that's the infancy of our journey together, man. Gerard, in the legitimately in the chat, let us know if you have been following us all the way since back then, because
if he knows about Thailand, then he clearly knows it, because that was in our first year doing it. So that was when I have pictures from those days, unless I posted a few pictures on Twitter maybe and LinkedIn a few times. So it could be that you've seen it, but I think Gerard's probably been a long time roller here.
I also think I'd like to get a bit of a roll call here. I want to have rankings. Who has been the longest tenured supporters? Not just
that's got to be it. That's got to be it.
And Doug.
Yeah.
Are the Hawks tanking? I don't know why I found this I did find this kind of low key interesting. Trae Young goes down. Not that, it's just okay, what is their agenda this season? That actually, they're not scaring anybody in the play-in tournament and making the playoffs. And does it really matter if they make it and there's the conversation about what they're going to do with Murray, and the trade talks around the deadline and the offseason, all those things? If there's going to be a shakeup here with that franchise, I guess in theory, they could be interested in trying to get to the bottom, but nothing suggested they still played all the guys that they had available tonight.
Oh, yes. I was looking real quick about this is a good year for them if they were going to tank to do it, because their picks to Murray, their picks in the Murray trade to the Spurs don't kick until next year. So next
Okay,
year they have to convey a pick to the Spurs in the original Murray trade, and then a swap, and then another pick. But this year they don't. So if they were gonna see, they're doing what the Nets should have done last year. Like, which is like when it's like, oh, you don't have to convey the picks yet, or it was a swap then, and Houston also stinks. Hey, tank now. Now, of course, they don't do it, and then they get swept in the playoffs. So great news. But that is what they should do, right? It's like you have one more year of pick. If you think you're trading Trey in the offseason, there's like been a ton of smoke with that fire.
Right.
So that's what I would do. But again, some of these teams are, their motivations are different than what you and I would do.
Confirmed. Doug Norrie exposing our Thailand adventures on the social media platform.
Bummer. All right. Well, whatever. You should
get out of here, Gerard.
What a perfect opportunity to lie. As a big proponent of lying, that was a good opportunity for you to lie and just be like, yeah, but you blew it. So
yeah, and by the way, would have totally inflated our egos around this too. Nevertheless, if anybody else has anything, we'll shout it out. Otherwise, we may cut this one just like a little bit shorter. Again, Doug already mentally wore himself out doing a quote solo episode, even though I showed up and gave him the Herculean lift. Here we go. Let's just do this one right here. From Jean Rame, frequent flyer. Do you guys think that they should shut Simmons down to give Kevin Ollie a chance with the roster rotation? I feel with Simmons in and out, it makes things harder for them. I will say, we talked about this the other game, about how they were still able to get in transition. They were able to still get some assists going without Ben Simmons being a part of it. The idea, like you and I agree, it's about playing out the string and getting his money off your books after next year. I do think it's okay to look at this roster and say, I need to figure out a lot of different things. And it doesn't need to be focused about, well, Ben Simmons, Cam Thomas, Mikal Bridges all need to play together as much as possible. I actually think it's okay to say we need to find combinations that don't include them all being together, because we don't know what we're going to look like a year from now.
I mean, who even knows how much he can play? So every time he can play, I would just play him. I don't know. That's where I stand.
Chances are he'll miss another.
That's what I mean, because history will tell you that most times he won't be able to play anyway. I'm not knocking him. It's just true. And so I would just, anytime he was available, I would just play him. You laughing at what are you laughing at, this 88 thing? Yeah.
I think we're all having a good time tonight.
Well, this is my running gag on Twitter is that I keep pushing back the years that I've been a Nets fan. So it was like the 70s and the 60s. Yeah. Since 1947, buddy. Okay, we're gonna get out of here. Much appreciated, everyone that's been along for this one. Happy that Adam got into the podcast tonight, because it's always just fun to chop it up after a W. We're gonna be back next week. We're gonna probably try to do something maybe post game on Saturday. We'll see how that goes. They play very early on Saturday at 3 p.m. And I've not told Adam, but I'm gonna be gone all day at my daughter's dance competition, which thankfully runs from the crack of dawn.
Mm-hmm. But until
till the time turns over into Monday, it seems that, so that's what we got going on Sunday. I do want to get into the Jeff Peterson thing, moving out the GM who just took the job in Charlotte, and what that possibly means for them losing him in the front office, which I think is relevant, though we just don't have time to do it right now. So there's just other stuff to talk about. So that's kind of the schedule going forward. Much appreciated everyone that jumped in. To you two and me, appreciative of Adam jumping into the podcast tonight. Damn it, I wish I had thought of that.
That is good.
That is good.
Listen, guys,
not often that someone,
but this is a collective effort now. We're building something here.
Yeah, nice job, because there's not often where someone posts something where I really wish I had thought of it, and now I can't in good conscience post that, even though I really want to, because that's a person who found this. Shoot, that's great. Good job by you. We'll close on that. Okay. We'll be back again, hopefully on Saturday, talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.